So much, Colleen, and thank you for having me. Thanks to Allison for inviting me. It's always fun to reconnect with people from Brescia. It was a special place, and a long time ago that I was there. I haven't been back to visit in a while, but I definitely will want to get back there and see those new food labs, because they're probably a lot different than the food labs I spent a lot of time in. Yeah, so as Colleen said, I do recipe development, and when I was at Brescia, they kind of didn't know what to do with me, because I knew I wanted to go into recipe development and food science sort of thing, but at that time most people were going into dietetics, so I sort of navigated my way and trained as a chef's apprentice in my summer job, so that I had both the practical sort of hands-on cooking experience and then the sort of textbook and food science and nutrition experience. So it was a great combination. And when I first graduated, I was actually signed up to go to Stratford Chef School. I went out west to work at Chateau Lake Louise in the hotel there, and I worked in the kitchens there for the summer. And then I decided at that point I was not going to be a chef in a hotel or restaurant. Fast forward a few years later, I met my husband, who was then a chef. We met, I was working for Canadian Living magazine. I got kind of my dream job right after university. Worked in the test kitchen at Canadian Living magazine, and then went out to Jasper Park Lodge for an event called Christmas in November. Met a chef, ironically enough, and long story short, we got married, and then we ended up owning a restaurant. So I did get back into a restaurant for a while, and then we sold that a number of years ago. We live north of Peterborough in Buckhorn, Ontario. I don't know if anyone knows where Buckhorn is, but it's a lovely spot, lots of lakes and lots of wildlife. And my tiny little kitchen here is where I do all of my books and recipes for Food and Drink magazine, recipes for marketing boards. And the one we're doing today, this did appear in Food and Drink magazine at a time, but I have been making profiteroles since I was a kid, literally. Profiteroles, yes, somebody asked how to say that. That's how I say it. You may call them choux puffs. CHOUX is the name of the pastry. It's the French pastry. Is choux pastry, and we make profiteroles or eclairs or Paris brest with them. So those are the kind of different names for the exact same thing, and we're going to learn how to do that. As I mentioned, we're going to start with our custard, and Benny the Beagle thinks he needs to be part of the class, so just ignore him until he starts stealing the profiteroles. We're going to start with the custard, and I've got my recipe here because I don't want to forget anything. And we split up the whipping cream. So we're going to heat some of the whipping cream in a saucepan. So get your sort of smallish, medium saucepan, and we're going to pour it. Does everybody that didn't go to Food Lab have their liquid measure cups and their dry measuring cups? So we're going to use liquid measuring cups and pour in the whipping cream, and we're just using 3/4 of a cup to heat. And I always bend down and read it at eye level, because that's the food science way. And scrape that into your saucepan. And we're just going to heat that up. You don't want it to boil over. So you actually will just put that in the pan right now. Don't turn the heat on yet. But we're going to get the eggs ready. And this is where the messy part starts. So you'll notice we're only using the yolks in the custard. You can make custard with whole eggs. It's not as rich and creamy, and it tends to kind of curdle a little bit more. So we're going to use all the whites. We're going to take out all the whites, and I want to show you it's messy. So if you're squeamish about touching gooey things, you might not want to use this method, but I do find it is the surefire way to separate your eggs safely without cracking them. So because we're just using the yolks, it doesn't really matter if we break a yolk at this point, but I want to save my whites. And I saw somebody had a question about what to do with whites. We will talk about that, because you end up with this collection of whites, and you stash them all in your freezer. And then when they start falling out because there's no more room in your freezer, you can make some things. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But to crack my egg, I just tap it on the counter, not on the side of the bowl, because if you tap it on the side of the bowl, it can go, the shell goes right into the bowl, and you don't want that. So I tap it on the counter, a little tap, and then crack it all the way into a bowl. Then I take my hand and scoop out the yolk. Now, eggs separate easier when they're cold. So the white should just drip off, and then you kind of pinch it there, and there's my yolk, and that's going into the bowl, and the white is going into the container of whites. And if there's any yolk in there and you want to make something that you need to beat the whites, you're actually not going to get as much volume if there's any yolk. So you want to be careful if you do want to use your whites for that. If you're just making omelets or something, not a big deal if there's a bit of yolk in there. So we're going to have 5 egg yolks. So we'll keep cracking and separating those. If you want to use the shell and do the 2 shell method, that is totally cool if that's what you do. But I find every time I try and do that, I catch an edge of the shell and then I break my yolk. So, and this is the very home economist way to do one at a time. It is slower, it drives chefs crazy, but I find it's more guaranteed you're not going to wreck a whole bunch of whites if you do them one at a time. And anytime I'm baking, I crack my egg into a separate bowl first, not into the main bowl, because that's exactly when I drop the piece of shell and then you're fishing in your batter to get your shell out. So how many yolks is that? That's 3. Don't lose track while you're counting and chalking is the other tip. I saw somebody posted that they like egg white omelets. I like whole egg omelets myself, but lots of people like egg white omelets. The other thing, angel food cake obviously is a classic with egg whites, and it uses like 12 egg whites. So that's a really good use if you've stocked up. And when I put them in the freezer like this, I label the container with how many whites that are in there so that you don't have to, guess. And then with the date, and then you can keep them in the freezer for like a year, really. They quite hold up well. One of the other things I love to make is macaron. So if you haven't ever tried macaron and you have a stash of whites, they are a little bit tricky, but there's actually some online classes you can do for macaron, and they're a fun one to try out. And then even just the coconut macaroons, where you just whisk the egg white with some coconut and sugar, they're a really great way to use up white. So I'm going to wash my hands. Did everybody get their yolks separated? Everything's good. So now we can turn our cream on. So just turn it on medium heat and heat it until bubbles form around the edge. Like I said, you don't want to bring it to a boil. Oh, the beagle needs out. He rings the bell to go outside. So anyway, so heat your cream till there's little bubbles forming around the edge. So we're going to keep one eye on that. And then in our bowl, we're going to add a 1/4 cup of sugar. So there's a 1/4 cup of sugar with our yolks, and then just whisk those until they're blended. And you don't have to whip them too much until they're thick or anything. And what we're going to do once the cream is warm, we're going to do what's called tempering the eggs. So the trick with tempering the eggs is obviously you're putting hot cream into cold egg yolks that want to coagulate. And we do want them to coagulate, and that's what thickens your custard. But what we want to do is do it in a really controlled way. So whisk these up, and then I'm actually adding a bit of flour. Some pastry cream, this is basically creme patissiere or custard. This is quite a thick one because we're going to fold whipped cream into it later. But as you can see, it's just enough to whisk it with the flour. I put 2 tablespoons of flour in there and the 1/4 cup of sugar, and that's all that's in here. And one of the things with the flour is it makes a nice thick set custard. It also holds a lot better. So if you want to make it ahead, I find a cornstarch custard can kind of start to go weepy a little bit if you make it ahead, but this one is nice and sturdy. So this is one I make a lot and find that it holds quite well. So I've got little bubbles just starting around the edge of my pan. Does anybody else have little bubbles? And you can see some steam coming up. So that's about as much as you need to heat your cream. So I'm going to turn off that heat, and I'm going to actually grab a ladle for today because normally I tip it out of the pan, but I want you to see just how slowly we want to drizzle the warm cream. So is everybody at this point? I don't want to rush. Anybody need me to stop? Say yes, or you probably can't unmute yourself and then you're paying attention to your cream. So I'm going to carry on. So I see Judy. Judy's good. Okay. Ready to pour. So now this is where it takes a little bit of coordination. I'm going to take a ladle full of cream and then just slowly drizzle it in. So you can see just a tiny thin stream whisking the entire time. So if I were to dump the cream in, I would have a nice bowl of scrambled egg yolks. But by doing it this way, we're bringing the heat gradually to the yolks, and they're going to warm up, but they're not going to coagulate really, really fast. So drizzle, 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 and it feels really tedious. Later on, we can drizzle a little more freely, but it definitely pays off to be really patient at the beginning. Thin out your yolks, warm them up gradually with your cream, and then you don't get scrambled eggs. So we're just going to keep drizzling. This is where it takes a little coordination. If you don't have a little ladle, you can use a measuring cup or a measuring spoon even. And then once I've got about half in, then I'll tip the pot and we can do it a little more, but I'll show you just how smooth this is. So as you can see, there's no bits of egg or anything. You see in there, I don't want to tip it too much, but it's nice and it's thinning out. So now I'm just going to drizzle, drizzle, drizzle from the pot. You see it's still steaming, but we're not cooking our eggs because we're being really gradual. And then this all goes back into the pot. So now my eggs are warm. So you feel the bottom of your bowl should feel fairly warm. So once it feels warm, you can kind of add a lot more of the cream a lot quicker. So you're not going to shock the yolks because they're already warmed up. So drizzle those in. And now we're going to go back into the pot all at once and then put it back over the heat. Now this is only going to take like 2-3 minutes. So put it over medium heat. One of the catches is, depending on your pot. Now I've got my nice copper pot because that is, that's why I own it. That's why I hauled it across Paris, because I needed a copper pot to make custard, but you don't need a copper pot to make custard. You can make it in a little stainless steel pot, but the heat, you want to keep it consistent. So you want to whisk absolutely constantly. Don't answer the phone. Don't let the dog in or out. Do not leave your custard and whisk, whisk, whisk. So I've got a silicone whisk here. You could just use a metal one, but I find the silicone ones are really great because they don't sort of scrape the pot or anything. And I do find that makes it for a nice smooth custard. And just keep whisking and you'll feel the actual thickening start. And it, like I said, it just takes a couple of minutes. I've got it on medium heat. As it gets a little bit thicker, you might want to turn your heat down. And depending on your stove, I've got a gas stove, so it's quite sensitive to the heat. If you've got an electric stove and you find it's a bit hot, pull it right off the burner and the heat from the pot will continue to cook it. You don't want it to come to a boil too quick. Again, you'll scramble the eggs and you'll get lumps of the flour. But by doing this gradually, we do want to cook out the flour and cook out the eggs, and it'll thicken up really quite quickly. So I'm going to switch this bowl out. And then in the instructions, I gave you instructions to get a larger bowl with ice water and a smaller bowl, and that's so that we can cool the custard down really quickly. I didn't bother with my ice water because I forgot to make ice cubes. So I'm just going to tell you how you would do it at home. So
Jen, when did you add the flour?
I added the flour to the egg yolks.
Okay.
So when I had the yolks and the sugar, and then I added the flour.
Got it. Missed that part. Thanks.
You missed that part? Oops.
Yep.
You know what you can do? Whisk, to get your little bowl of flour, whisk a little bit more cream into your flour to make a paste, and then add it.
Okay.
To your pot.
Thanks.
We can save it. No worries. So mine is thickening already. It's starting to thicken. you want it really nice and thick, and you want to make sure the flour gets cooked out, sort of the flavor of the flour gets cooked out. So I'm going to turn my heat down though, and then adjust the heat again so it's not going to come to a boil, and then but keep it nice and smooth. And mine is going to thicken quite a bit right now, and as you can see, it's thickening up. I hope you can see that. And that's about all it takes to cook that out. So I'm going to take it off the heat. So as you can you see that it's nice and thick? And then we're going to strain it. So you don't have to strain it. It's a very pastry chefy thing, but it also helps if you did get a little bit of scrambled eggs. We're going to take them out. Nobody's going to notice. So I'm going to get my nice Brescia spatula, and I've got a sieve set into a bowl. Make sure you have a heat-proof bowl. Don't get a plastic bowl at this point because it is quite hot. And get it out of the pot right away because you don't want it to keep cooking. Now this is very thick, but we're going to shove it through the sieve and into the bowl. Now this is a really fine sieve I've got that may not actually work. I'm going to grab my other sieve. This one's really quite big, so I'm going to go into this bowl, and I'm not sure why that's so thick today, but that's good. We want it to be thick because when we add the cream later, it does get thinned out. So sieve that through. And we have mint and vanilla to add. So we can let it cool just slightly and then stir in the mint and the vanilla. So we'll chop some fresh mint. If you don't have fresh mint, don't worry about it because it's very delicious just as a vanilla pastry cream. You can see how thick that is coming through the sieve. And I don't see any scrambled egg bits, so I got it off the heat fast enough. But we'll see how we scrape that in. And then, like I said, you can let it cool just for a couple of minutes and we'll chop our mint. Sometimes you add butter at this stage. Sometimes you can add, orange zest or lemon zest. There's lots of things. I did a variation on this with matcha tea, and you'd infuse that if you like matcha. And so if I had another bowl with ice water, I would set this bowl in it so that it will cool the custard really quick. I've got one in the fridge, so I'm not too worried. But if you do have your custard hot now and you want to cool it, set it in that bowl of ice water and it'll cool down much, much faster. So I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla and I'm going to chop my mint. Now I do have fresh mint here. One of the tips I find, because we're not going shopping very often, never mind we live 35 minutes away from the grocery store, but I try and buy a lot at once, especially right now. So if you buy these little packages of mint, I mean, in the summer, I've got more mint in the garden than you would ever believe, but in the winter, I have to buy this. So take the package, as soon as you get it home, fold up a little piece of paper towel, put that in your herbs. So mint, basil, thyme, any of those herbs that come in these packets, and it's amazing. It saves the mint from going all mushy and smushy, and it really absorbs some of the moisture, but it also keeps the mint nice and fresh and from going slimy. So that's your shopping tip for your mint. And here's my vanilla in the custard. I've got my mint leaves here. I just picked the mint leaves off and I'm going to chop those up. And like I said, you don't have to put the mint in this, but I find it's a really nice fresh flavor and goes really well with the berries. So we're going to get that mint into the custard and then let that cool. So put plastic wrap directly on the surface of your custard, and that prevents the skin from forming. And it does slow the cooling down because it kind of traps the heat inside. But if you stick it in your bowl of ice water, it'll cool down nice and quick. And that's it for the custard. So it so if anybody has any questions, this would be a good time to ask them. No questions? Did anybody make scrambled eggs accidentally? You can admit it, it's okay. So put the plastic wrap directly on the surface, and that will prevent it from getting a thick skin, and pop that in the fridge. There's no room in my fridge, so that'll go over there for now. So now we're ready to switch over to our profiterole. So has anybody, if anybody can show their little lady hand on their screen, has anybody made choux pigs before? No, I don't see anybody. Now I had, okay, there's my other pot. So now we need a medium-sized saucepan. So this is kind of, you know, average medium-sized saucepan. And if you don't have sort of one that size, go bigger rather than smaller. And you will see why when we get into our bit of a beating session with our profiteroles. So for the profiteroles, we need a cup of water. And again, measured in my liquid measuring cup, a cup of flour. And if anybody hasn't been measuring the home economist way, when you get your flour bag, I pre-measured mine, so I should have saved it, but take a smaller scoop and your measuring cup, your 1 cup measuring cup, and spoon it into the 1 cup measure cup. Don't stick your 1 cup measure into your flour bag, because that can actually pack down the flour quite a lot, and then you can actually end up with way more flour in your cup than what you need. So for something like profiteroles, the balance of the liquid and the dry is really quite important, and you'll see when we're adding the eggs the different texture. So if you had way too much dry, you would need way more egg to compensate. So spoon it in and then level it off, and then you get an actual. Oh, Allison, that's what you just did. You just stuck your flour, your scoop in your flour bag, didn't you? Okay. Well, you might have too much flour, but we'll tell you how to fix that too. So here's my 1 cup of flour measured with the spoon and sweep method. Sometimes when you're reading a new cookbook or working with a new sort of blogger or something, you know, it might be good to inquire, sort of dig around and find out just how it is they measure, because some people do the scoop in. Hey Benny, hey, no. Some people do scoop it in, and that's how they do it. Some people do it by weights. Obviously by weights is very precise, and if you have scales, I love cooking by weights, but I know not enough people have scales. So the spoon and sweep method of measuring dry ingredients is a little more, you know, consistent than the scooping in. So in our saucepan, we're going to put 1 cup of water, and we've got a tablespoon of just regular sugar. And these don't turn out very, very sweet. The little bit of sugar helps with browning, and you can even use them for savory fillings, which we'll talk about later. But it's not enough sweetness to notice, but it does help with the browning. So I had a wooden spoon somewhere. Oh, it's right here on my stove. So here's my 1/3 of a cup of butter, and I did cut it into little cubes, and that helps it melt. So just put those in, and it's a very odd combination. It's a very unusual pastry with the water and the butter and the sugar in the pot, but you'll see it's a very, very cool kind of thing, that how it comes together. So put that over sort of medium-high heat, bring it to a boil, stir enough to dissolve the sugar, and we need a pinch of salt, or 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. So just regular salt is fine. Any kind of salt. Who knew that in 2021 there'd be like 17 different kinds of salt at the Sobeys grocery store these days. It's pretty fancy salt around. So you could just use any salt for this one. And we're gonna have more eggs. So let that come to a boil. I'm gonna crack one egg into a bowl for now. And I'm gonna whisk that one egg. The other ones you don't even need to whisk. I'm just gonna do them one at a time. So I'm gonna have one ready bowl and one that I'm gonna whisk. So you'll see why. We'll add the one that's whisked at the very end. And so get that ready, because when we're adding the egg, you might not need all of it. So it's one of those things, a little bit more humidity, a little bit more flour, a little more water boiled off. You want to adjust the texture of the dough. And it's kind of if you haven't seen the pastry, the choux pastry dough before, it's kind of an odd beast, but we'll walk you through it. So my butter is melting and not steaming yet, but you just want to bring it to a boil. You don't want to boil it for too long, again, because that can boil off some of your moisture that we need in the profiteroles. And while that's coming to ready, make sure you have it ready your baking sheet. So I've got a baking sheet. These are still pans, pan liners, or this is Cookina brand. They're silicone. You can use parchment. I use parchment all the time for these liners because I hate scrubbing baking sheets. You don't need them, but it guarantees that they're going to come off. So I find it saves that, oh, are they going to stick? Are they going to come off? I use it for cookies, for everything, for roasting vegetables. I use them all the time, and the reusable ones are great. Parchment paper is compostable, so you can stick it in your green bin. But I do find the reusable ones are also handy to have, and I do bake a lot, so I find that they're worth the little bit of investment. And so when we've got our water to a boil, the other thing I'm going to get ready. So I've just got a tall cup here, and I've got this is literally a disposable piping bag. You buy them at Bulk Barn or Michael's or something. This happens to be Wilton brand, but you can just buy no name brand. And I've got a piping tip. So if you don't have a piping tip, you can get a freezer Ziploc bag, which I had. So get the sort of freezer string, and you just cut the little corner off, so that can make a piping bag. Or we're going to show you how to do the profiteroles with 2 spoons as well. So we have options how to make them. So I'm going to get that water ready. Get a little bowl of water ready. Get our piping bag. Oh, mine's starting to come to a boil. I've got this cup here, and that's really just my piping bag. So when we begin the meeting, we just try to use these to fill the piping bag. But if you stick it in a cup like this, it will hold it for you if you don't have a helper in your kitchen. So we'll just set that aside. Okay, is everybody's water boiling and their butter melted? I'm going to do this right in front of you here, but then it's supposed to stay on the stove, but I want you to see what I'm doing. Right here, I've got it water boiling and butter melted, and 1, 2, 3, dump all your flour in it and start beating the heck out of it. So don't beat it too much that it flies out the sides, but give it a good vigorous stir. And we're going to go back on the heat, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So it looks a mess when you first add it. Don't panic, because it really doesn't look like it's going to make anything. But it comes into a ball pretty quick, and you'll see it kind of cleans the sides of the pot. And I'm getting a nice ball already. So as you can see, it's kind of turning into a nice smooth ball, and it comes together. And cook it for just a couple of minutes. So we're cooking off some of the moisture, and we're forming with the flour and the kneading, and it makes a 2 minutes. This is your work in your arm. And you do want to cook it enough, but don't let it brown. If it starts to brown, pull it off. And I think it says turn the heat down a little bit, so do that. And follow the recipe, not what I'm doing. So stir that, and it kind of smooth. It turns into sort of this smooth paste. I'm going to do about 30 more seconds. And you can see it's nice and smooth now, and it forms a ball when I stir it. So it clumps all together like that, and that is ready. So take that off the heat, put it on something that can handle the heat. Turn off your burner, and now is when we're going to add the eggs. So this gets a little bit scary because it looks like a mess again when we add our first egg. So I've got mine on a damp cloth so it will stop spinning. The pot won't spin around. Dump in 1 egg and beat the heck out of it. You can do this in a stand mixer if you want. I personally love to do it by hand. If you want to put it in a stand mixer because it's too much of a workout or it's too messy for you, go for it. You can put it in your stand mixer with the paddle attachment. I would not use a handheld mixer because it's going to be too tough for most handheld mixers, and it's going to blow the motor, or it's going to fling sugar straight all over your kitchen. So I do not recommend that. So as you can see, that 1 egg got nice and incorporated really quick, and we're getting a bit of a yellow tint to the dough, and it's smoothed out again. So now I'm going to add 1 more egg. Now I put an extra egg in my bowl, so I'm going to take that away now before I get sidetracked and add too many. But I put another one just in case I needed it. So here's my egg. So add another egg, dump, 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 stir, 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 and beat that in. When it comes to our last egg, like I said, we're going to add it gradually because you might not need the whole thing. But if, like I said, see, it looks messy when you first add them, and it's a little disconcerting because it splits apart like this. But then it's going to come back together. So I'm going to grab my spatula again, scrape off my spoon, and beat that until that egg comes in. And you want to be vigorous. You don't have to necessarily be fast, but you want to be vigorous. But don't be so vigorous it slops out of the pot. So that's why I said don't go with a smaller pot, go with a bigger pot if you need to. So as you can see, that one is also now incorporated. And this gets 1 more for sure. So there's our 3rd egg going in. And then egg number 4, we're going to do gradual. So when you get to incorporating egg number 3, you'll see what the texture is like, and you'll see how smooth when it comes together. You'll be able to see sort of how thin it is, but you don't want it too thin because if you pipe it too thin, they won't hold their shape, and you'll just end up with little puddles. But if it's too thick, they're going to be dry and tough. So it's a bit of an experience, bit of a guessing game about how much more egg we'll need. But I'm going to get this one stirred in. Okay, see if anybody else is cooking along. Got the cameras off. There's 2 studios. So now, as you can see, it's getting shiny and it's quite thick. So that's really, 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 really thick. Like that. So I'm going to put a little more egg in, but I don't think I need a whole egg. I want it to drop off the spoon, but a little faster than that. So, and you want it to have a bit of a shine. So mine's got a bit of a shine coming. I'm going to whisk this, maybe pour in half of that egg, and then see what happens when I incorporate that. And one of the things is you can sort of put a little dollop on your baking sheet and see if it holds its shape. And if it's really, really stiff, like I said, it's better to go a little bit stiffer than too thin if you're not sure, because a little bit stiffer, they're gonna puff. If they're too thin, they're just gonna sort of flatten out the oven. So now, did anybody join late that didn't preheat their oven to 425? This would be a really good time to get that oven on if you didn't already. But now I think that's
Jennifer,
yeah.
what happens if it's not thickening? How do we thicken it?
If it's not thickening, that is unusual. So you don't have a paste like this. Who is asking the question?
It's Colleen. I'm asking on behalf of Deb.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly what's happening. So Deb, do you want to chime in and explain what's happening?
Yeah, mine's not getting thick enough.
Can you show me in the camera?
Sure.
Oh, did you add a whole cup of flour?
Yep.
Really?
Is that what the recipe said? Yeah. Is that what the recipe said, a cup? Yeah.
One cup.
Yep.
And 1 cup of water?
Yep.
Huh. What size eggs do you have?
What size what?
Do you have large size eggs?
Large, yep.
Yeah. And how many have you put in?
I put in 3.
Really? Well, that's very unusual. I would.
Do I add more flour?
Yeah, I would add like a couple tablespoons of flour at this point. Did anybody else have that problem?
No, but could you show how thick it is by having it come off your spoon again? Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it sort of comes off like a sheet.
Kind of like a big blob. So it drops off. Actually, now I've kind of let it sit a bit. I might add a tiny bit more egg. It's maybe not all of that whole egg. So I'm gonna have it. I want it to be a little bit glossier and a little bit thinner, because otherwise it's gonna be quite hard to pipe. So I'm gonna do 1 tiny bit more egg, and then this should be about perfect. Just once I get that incorporated. And now can you see the bit of a shine? And
yep.
And it droops kind of off like that. So how's yours looking now, Deb?
It seems to be getting thicker.
Thicker? Okay.
I still think I could use more.
Yeah, maybe give it some like really good arm elbow grease. Whip it. Okay, so I'm going to take my piping bag. Found it went from runny to thick after some good stirring. Good tip, Allison. Yeah, like you really need to kind of get your whole shoulder into it to whip it up. Now I'm going to take my drop it into my. I have to do it like this. That's good. Need a stiff. So as you can see, it's quite, I'm trying to think of what sort of Play-Doh texture, you know, after you've been working with the Play-Doh and you got it to a nice molding texture. That's the texture. It's still warm. Are you getting any thickening now, Deb?
Yeah, I think so.
No, it's definitely not looking like yours.
No.
I wonder if there sounds almost like maybe, did your water come to a boil? Did you cook it for the good 2 minutes on the stove after you added the flour?
Pardon?
Oh, yeah, we did, because we added it all at once. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we did. I have
Yeah.
three helpers.
Okay.
Well, I'm not gonna
I'm
add
trying
it.
to troubleshoot in my mind here for you. And yours thickened up, Allison, after you got it whipped a little bit more? Perfect. Okay. So now,
Jen,
Yeah.
is this about right?
yeah, that looks great, Judy.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect then. Okay, thanks.
So now I've got it in the piping bag. How big of a hole do we cut in the Ziploc? Just about a 1/2 inch. You don't want it too big because it's better to sort of pipe in a circle. I'll show you how we pipe in a circle. The other thing is, if you don't have a piping bag, I'll show you first. Take 2 tablespoons and dip them in a little bowl of water like this. Then you take some of your stuff. I'm going to take just a spoonful of my stuff. And then use the 2 spoons, the wet spoons, just to dollop it like that. So you can just make a dollop. I'm making kind of medium size. You can make little minis. This is just a medium size. So just dollop it like that. It doesn't even matter if it's a little bit rough. And that's actually quite easy if you don't want to fuss around with the piping bag or the Ziploc. And just the key is to make them about even size so that they bake at the same time. So I'm actually going to take a little bit off of that one. And don't worry about the shape too much because we're going to shape those after. So for the piping bag, one of the keys is, if you're piping a rosette, you go wide around the outside and then swirl up to the top. If you do that with your shoe puffs, all their little heads fall over in the oven. So you want to keep it squat. So you pipe the circle around the outside and then pipe in the inside and keep your tip sort of pressed into the dough so that you're not kind of building up, you're kind of compacting it. So when you're doing that, keep it squished and low and then keep it compact like that. So those are just kind of going to be shaped profiteroles. You can do eclair shapes. You could do ring shapes. So same with the ring shape, keep it compact. And the ring shape are cute. They make little mini Paris breasts. And those are really pretty to do. So you'll see what that happens in the oven with those. And normally I would put these on different baking sheets if I was doing different shapes because they might bake at different times, but we're just winging it for tonight. And I've got 3 little ring shapes and I'll make some more dollops. And again, make sure you keep it nice and low and don't perch it up too much. And squeeze out your piping bag. So give them lots of space on the baking sheet because they will puff quite a bit. That's the point of them. And you want to make sure they have room to expand. Just finishing the end of this one. Doesn't even matter if it's a little bit wonky because we're going to pat it with moist hands and we can bring it back into shape. So I've emptied my piping bag there. And I'm going to take my wet fingers and just kind of pat them so that they're nice and compact. And you press down any tips. So see this tip here, that would burn pretty quick in the oven. So I'm going to press it down and make them nice little compact mounds and with no pointy tips. And they will puff up and go into a much nicer shape. So these ones that I dolloped, I'm just going to smooth out any ragged edges with my wet hands. And these don't need an egg wash. They don't need anything else on top. And just pat those down a little bit. Make sure there's no pointy bits. How's everybody? Is everybody able to dollop them onto their baking sheets. There's one. So it does make 2 trays, and like I said, you want to space them out. So just put one aside. You only want to open the oven as minimally as possible. So don't put those in the oven yet, because we want that blast of heat to get into the puffs. So I'm gonna just dollop the rest rather than fussing with my piping bag again. Oh, I was going to show you eclairs. I will. I'll show you little eclairs. I baked some of those. And so when I was in high school, I told you I made profiteroles and eclairs and things a lot. And I would barter for things. And I actually got to go see a U2 concert for the price of some mini eclairs. My dad's friend was able to get me concert tickets, and the deal was I would pay him in eclairs. So and I got lots of friends and favors by trading for eclairs. So it was one of those things that I just love to make. So for the eclairs, I'm just kind of doing a thick little length, and these are little mini ones. So as you can see, it's nice and thick, and one thick streak of the dough. And again, I'll pat down any of the tips so that there's no pointy bits. And if you find it sticking in your piping bag, just use a wet finger to break it off. No, I don't have enough in this one. It's going to be a very, very mini eclair. So just use a wet finger like that to get it out of the piping bag. And if you wanted to do eclairs with the spoons, just dip those in the water and kind of make little ridges of the dough in a kind of an eclair shape, and we'll pat those into a nicer shape with our wet fingers. So it doesn't even matter what it looks like at this point. And then I always like to use a spatula to get all of that goo out of the pot. Make sure you don't waste any. Put it down the sink. These little eclairs, like I said, when you come to filling, we're going to fill them with the sweet custard. But something Jay mentioned earlier, you can do like a whipped cream cheese and some smoked salmon in them. You can do herb, just an herb cheese filling, and you can even put cheese. There's a appetizer called gougere, and it is cheese right in the choux pastry, and they're really quite wonderful to taste. And you can put like Gruyere or Parmesan. I'm going to take a little off of this one. And if your spoons get sticky, just dip them back in the water. And so those look pretty ugly right here, but that doesn't matter because we're going to smooth them out with our fingers. Add a little bit more to that one. And again, just make sure you have even sized things on your baking sheet. So I'm going to take my fingers and make little logs that are neat and fairly tidy, and just smooth out the lumps, because the lumps is where you get kind of a wonky shape once they get puffing in the oven.
Jen, for both the circular ones and those, how big would you say they are? Like, I'm trying to compare it to your finger to know how thick.
Well, you know what? This has measures. This is 3 inches long and by about 1 inch wide. And the puffs I have are about, I'd say they're about 2 inches, 3 fingers wide. So about 2 inches wide and about 1 inch high.
Great, thank you.
Good question. And really the neat thing about these is you can make little tiny ones, you can make really big ones. It's just a matter of, you know, baking them a little longer and then making sure you have even sizes on your baking sheet so that they bake in the same amount of time. So I've patted these out. They are kind of little lumpy logs, but they'll look cute when they're baked. So I'm going to rinse my hands. And we're going to bake those in the oven. So they go in for about 15 or 20 minutes. And I'm using 2 racks in my oven. So one kind of in the bottom third and one in the center. And I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes. And then I'm going to switch them. If you have a good convection oven, you can do them on convection and it'll cook more evenly. But if you don't have a convection, definitely switch them around because the bottom rack will get a lot darker on the bottom and the top ones, you know, won't cook as much on the bottom. So it is good to switch the racks around, but don't do it too soon. Don't open your oven at all for like the first 15 minutes because that is when all of that heat is cooking all of the butter and the egg and the flour that we whipped in there. So it's going to inject all of the heat and all of those things are going to puff. So that air we whipped in and the steam from the water is what's going to make them puff. So I'm going to tidy this up, let everybody get reset. And now it's the patience part, but we can start working on our filling while those bake. Does everybody have them in the oven now?
Did you say with convection, you don't have to rotate the pans?
You shouldn't have to if you have a good convection oven. My convection still kind of is a little bit uneven, but if you think you have a pretty decent convection, you shouldn't have to rotate the pans. But at 15 minutes, I would check anyway, just to make sure your lower layer isn't getting too dark on the bottom.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And so the other thing we're going to do is I'm going to whip a little bit of cream and we're going to mash some blueberries. So like I said, you can make them with any berries. When I did the photo earlier, I didn't have blueberries, so I did blackberries. You could do raspberries, you could do a mixture of berries, or you could do no berries at all. Sometimes I just slice strawberries, so I'll put the custard and then just slice strawberries, and that looks really pretty too. So I'll start building some, and I'm cream. And I've got my custard that I made earlier. Oh, I didn't add mint to it. Oh well, I could add some mint. We'll do it without mint. So this is the custard I made earlier. You see it's really super thick. And I'm going to whip a little bit of cream. So this was, I've just got a glass measuring cup here only because it's a nice straight-sided bowl and it's clear so you can see what I'm doing. But you can just do it in a regular bowl. So I chilled my bowl and my cream so it's really, really nice and cold. And then that way you get a lot more lift and you get a stronger whipped cream. So I do find that cream is a little bit odd. Sometimes in the winter it doesn't whip as much, but you should be able to get a decent whip out of it. So excuse the noise for a minute. Here's a bit of a trick. Where's my tea towel? If you put a tea towel around, it doesn't splatter all over the house. So just kind of make a tent with the tea towel. And if you've ever had whipped cream, just do that until it's starting to shake. There's my nice whipped cream. Now, a couple of tricks for whipped cream. We're going to be folding it into the thick custard, so we don't really need it to set. But one of the things, if you want your whipped cream to hold a little bit better, if you use a little bit of icing sugar, that helps stabilize it and it holds it. So you whip it, several hours ahead, put it in the fridge, and then use it later. The other thing is a tiny bit of skim milk powder. Now, I do find the skim milk powder, I can taste it, so I always add a bit of sugar and some vanilla to kind of compensate for that. But this dry skim milk powder helps stabilize the whipped cream as well. So those are a couple little tips for, if you're making stuff ahead. And we're going to mash some blueberries. So I'm actually only going to put blueberries in half of mine. So I'm going to do about half a cup of blueberries. And I washed these already. And just literally take your potato masher. And you don't need to mash them a lot, but just crush them because they'll kind of infuse the pastry cream a little bit better. And I think in this recipe, I say to fold the whipped cream and stuff and then put it in the fridge, but we're not going to do that today because we don't have time. Is everybody's taste custard cool? Our frozen blueberries, absolutely. They're okay. They're going to make your pastry cream really, really kind of green though. So do be prepared for that. If I was using frozen berries, I might go with a raspberry before a blueberry, just because of that whole color. But it would look kind of cool too if they're kind of swirly. And I would just put them in sort of at the very end. Let those berries thaw ahead, and then just fold them in before you're going to serve them. So there's my crushed blueberries, not too crushed, and I'm going to fold. I've got like every spatula known to man used here. That's why I have a whole cup of them. So I'm going to fold my cream into my custard. So my custard is cold. If your custard isn't cold yet, and if you're not wanting to finish these tonight, hold off until the custard is cold, because hot custard will just deflate your cream and it'll be soupy. So if you do really want to finish it tonight, wait till your custard is a little bit cool. At least room temperature, if not cold. And I'm going to scrape all this off my plastic wrap. And then to lighten so you can see this is super thick. If I just added my whipped cream to it now and kept stirring and stirring, it would deflate the whipped cream. So I want to keep it quite light. So I'm going to add a bit of the whipped cream and kind of thin this out. And then it will be easier to fold in the rest of the whipped cream. Now, like I said, you could actually just sweeten whipped cream and not do the custard at all if you want. And you could do, vanilla or orange, a little bit of orange zest, a little bit of lemon zest is nice. And just, keep it really simple. And now remember, I didn't put the mint in here. The mint is in the other one. And so we're going to have plain with this one, and I'm pretty sure mine's still warm. Yeah, that's still pretty warm because I didn't put it in the ice bowl. But if you put it in an ice bowl, you should have some cool custard by now. And can anybody smell their profiteroles baking? I just got a whiff of them. So now that's a little bit thinner, so I can add more of the cream, and I'm going to add kind of another third to thin this out. And then fold in the final third, and that will keep your custard a lot fluffier. And could have done this in a bigger way. There's custard, and then I'm going to put some of it with the blueberries, and then some of it I'm going to just leave plain for demonstration purposes. But if you want, you can put all of the blueberries in right in. If you want to keep it and use these tomorrow or something, I would keep the blueberries out for now. It's going to hold a lot better with the blueberries, but it's fine if you put it in too. Quite okay. They'll taste delicious. I have 5 minutes on my timer for my 15 minutes, and I can start to smell them. If you can start to smell, every oven is so different. I actually have 3 thermometers in my oven right now because I was doing all that roast beef testing.
And I know mine runs a little bit hot. So if you aren't sure how your oven goes, maybe check them sort of at 12 minutes. I'll tell you in a couple of minutes, because they, they all bake, all the ovens bake slightly differently. And I always like to include a visual and a tactile if possible. So our cream puffs, we want them to be golden and puffed, obviously. And then when they're done, you want them to sound hollow. So that's how you'll know that they're getting cooked. So there's our lovely fluffy cream. I'm gonna fold some into my blueberries. Some plain. There's the blueberries. So you can see that really, really thick custard has thinned out. So it's like kind of airy and pillowy now with the blueberries. And that's all that takes. Then I'm going to start building a couple. You don't feel that you need to rush, but I want to show you how to sort of build them and glaze them. I made a glaze. I'm going to warm it up. I made a chocolate glaze because I love chocolate, and it is, the very classic eclair topping. And I actually just used just big bar of 72% dark chocolate. You could use milk chocolate. I used some whipping cream and some corn syrup. And truth be told, I just used Alton Brown's recipe. It's like glaze 2.0 or something, chocolate glaze 2.0. So it was just kind of it's a basic one. And the bit of corn syrup kind of keeps the gloss. So it's, I've just got this over a simmering pan of water, because you don't want the glaze too thin, because you want it to coat, and you don't want to heat it up too much. So I'm just gently warming it until it's fluid. So as you can see, it's not fluid at the moment, but in like seconds it will be. So don't heat it too much. I'll just do a couple little plates up. And how's everybody's? I've got 2 minutes left on my timer. I think I might even take a peek in my oven now, just the tiniest peek. And so that glaze, I'm going to actually just turn off the heat and sit it on the pan. Whoop, there we go. Chocolate everywhere. I've lost my oven mitts. I don't know where I put them. Not in the cupboard where they're supposed to be. Oh, no, I don't think they're ready. Thank you, Jay. One oven mitt. Those are AWOL. I don't know. So I'm going to leave them a couple more minutes before I switch them around. They're puffing. They're just starting to get dark. And I'm going to find some paper towel, clean up this chocolate. There we go. That's why we call this cooking without a net. Okay. So this chocolate glaze is thinning out over the warm water.
Jennifer, we have a question wondering, can you cook one tray at a time, or do you have to get them in the oven so they don't deflate?
It's better to get them both in the oven. I have held one back, but depending on the temperature of your room, if it's kind of, an 18, 19 degrees in your room, they'll be okay to hold. If it's a little bit warmer, that's gonna start flattening out the choux pastry. So you're gonna lose the puff. And you don't want to put it in the fridge because that's going to set them too much, and then the outside will cook and the inside won't. So it is better to bake them 2 trays at a time, although you do have to kind of watch. And if your oven's really uneven, you know, then I might hold one back as long as the room isn't too hot. So there's my 15-minute timer. I'm going to try not to wreck that spoon. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to quickly switch those around. I'll show you the nice puff. You see those puffing up? And so you can see the ones on the top shelf are browning on top already. So now they're going to the bottom shelf. And it should just be probably 5 more minutes. I'm going to set it for 4 and have a look. And then when they're done, you actually take them out, poke a little hole, and then put them in the turned off oven. And that dries them out inside a little bit, because right now they're going to be quite custardy inside. And if you don't bake them long enough, they're going to collapse. So it is important to bake them till they're hollow. So I'll leave them in the oven, and you'll see what I mean by the hollow sound. So we will get back to those. Here's my glaze. So that's nice and fluid, but it's clingy. Wait, warm it up just like a tad. It's kind of a fine line with this glaze. If it's too thin, it won't cling. If it's too thick, it gets lumpy. So I've got my puffs that I baked earlier. So these are the puffs. So as you can see, remember when I said don't sort of do the little swirl because you get the little lopsided head? This one I did on purpose. And so as you can see, it's got a little lopsided head. Whereas these ones I did nice and compact. And so they rose evenly and they don't have a little lopsided head. So I'm going to take some of the nice ones and cut those open. So as you can see, they're nice and gold on the bottom, but you can hear them. They're hollow inside. And then these are my little eclairs. So those are the little eclairs. You get the prettiest ones. There we go. And you can do the minis and serve 3. Those are quite big for what I would call mini. But you can do little mini ones and serve 3 on a plate. These are also really nice if you kind of intersperse them with a couple of other desserts, you know, just some little brownies or little tarts, and then people can have kind of one of each. And I've got a knife. This is actually a tomato, they call it a tomato knife. It's a little serrated knife, but any kind of steak knife or serrated knife is really good for cutting in. And so this is where I cut the little, poke the little hole when they came out of the oven. So I'm just going to take my serrated knife and cut into it. And I want you to see the inside because it looks solid from here, but see there's lots of opening there, and that's where our cream is going to go. So that's how, you know, they puffed up and they're cooked inside and they make a little hollow. So as you can see, it's a nice hollow in there. And then these guys, see there's a nice hollow, and we're going to build our cream filled profiteroles. So I'm going to just take some of the cream. Oh, look at that. I said I'd put it on for a minute, and now I probably got them too hot. Oh well. That's because I'm doing too many things at once and talking at the same time. So there's my chocolate glaze. I'll let that cool down a tiny bit now. And fill these guys. I'm going to get a spoon to put those on the plates. Dollop the cream, blueberries. I like to do them nice and full. They do get a bit messy, so if you want, if they're small and you want finger food, just put a little bit of the cream in because they'll be a little bit difficult to eat with their hands, but you can serve knife and fork. I figured there's nothing wrong with serving a knife for Christmas, or for dessert. There was a question there, I missed it. Colleen, did you see that one?
Yes, are you supposed to cut all the way through or like a hinge?
It depends how you want to do them. These ones I did a hinge, and these ones I cut all the way through. So I like these ones with the all the way through because then the little cap perches on top. And then these ones I just kind of did the hinge because I'm just going to put some of this cream in. And then I'm actually going to put a slice of strawberry. Those are going to get pretty little strawberries. And then that's going to be kind of like a little hinge. And just like that. And then these ones, this one I'm going to take the top right off. I'm going to put the bottom on there. I'm going to put the cream in the bottom. So the creams fill the bottom. And then I'm going to take the top and dip it in my chocolate glaze. Tilt it back and forth. And then there is our little chocolate eclair. This one, same thing. I'm going to take the top right off. I'm going to put plain cream in this one. And a couple of slices of strawberry. And I dip this one in the chocolate. As you can see, that's coating really nice and glossy. Oh, I put too much cream in that one. Flopped over, but that'll taste. There, the strawberries and the chocolate glaze. And these ones have the blueberry in them. So we're going to put a few blueberries on the plate. We'll put a strawberry in the plate. And then take our icing sugar shaker. If you don't have a shaker, you can use that sieve, the fine sieve that we used earlier. And then just do a little shake of icing sugar. And there we go. Oh, and you know what? I forgot to set my timer that second time, so I better use my nose. And they're smelling good to me. How's everybody's puffs doing? Those are looking good. I would say they're not quite done. They do get darker when you leave them in the turned off oven. So I'm going to take one and tap the bottom. Well, that's actually sounding quite done to me. They're hollow. They maybe need 1 minute. These ones are done. So there's our puffs. So these are the ones I piped and those are the ones I spooned. So you can see it, but they did get a little dark on the bottom because I wasn't paying attention. And so now I take my knife and now they are hot, but you can usually handle them. Just poke a little hole in the side. And then when those other ones are done, these go back in the oven and then they just dry out like the tiniest bit inside. And if, like I said, they weren't cooked at this point and you took them out of the oven just and let them cool, they would collapse. So this will help keep their shape, let some of the steam escape out of the center. And then as soon as these other ones are done, we will put these back in, turn the oven off. If you have an oven that stays really hot for a long time, just wedge the door open a little bit. My sister's oven stays hot for hours. So hers is a built-in wall oven and I just find stuff stays really, really hot in there. So if you do find your oven is too hot, you don't want them to brown too much, just wedge the door open a little bit. And we should be good. So I'm gonna turn the oven off. As you can see, we've got cute little puffs. I'm gonna put those ones back in to dry out while I poke these ones. Knife. Yeah, sound hollow, that's perfect. And they will darken some more in the turned off oven. So don't worry if you think they don't look cooked, as long as they sound hollow. And we're gonna dry them out. They are kind of hot, so I tend to have less sensitive fingers because I handle hot things a lot. So you could use an oven mitt or a tea towel if you to hold on. So those are all poked. Then back in to dry out for a few minutes. So I know we rushed through that a lot. How is everybody that's following along? Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question because I'm
Yes,
going to be filling these tomorrow for tomorrow night's dinner. How do I store them tonight once they cool down at room temperature? I noticed they said in the cookie tin, but I was just wondering if I could leave them at room temperature.
Excellent. And Kathleen had a similar question. So yeah, the puffs, leave them at room temperature. Obviously the custard goes in the fridge. And I would hold back on doing the whipped cream part if you haven't done that already. I would just leave the custard in the fridge. I think it's written in the recipe that you can do the custard a day ahead and then just whip the cream, just, you know, sort of an hour ahead. These puffs, what you can do, so you don't want to put them in a plastic container because we've got nice crispy crust on them. If you put them in a plastic container, they're just going to go soft and soggy. So I either wrap the entire tray like this in foil, or if you have cookie tins, just put them in cookie tins, leave them at room temperature, and you can even do it a couple of days ahead. And if they do soften, just pop them into kind of a 400-degree oven for like 5 minutes. I even freeze them. So you can let them cool completely, freeze them, and then when you want to use them again, just, you know, freshen them up in the oven. And they work quite well frozen. Filled, you're going to want to eat them pretty soon. So I don't know if anybody can resist eating these beauties if they've made them, you know, for more than an hour or two. But the pastry cream does soften the puffs quite a lot. So, and as you can see, it's kind of spilling over the plate. That one I filled too much, but they don't last a whole lot. Very long. I couldn't resist that chocolate. Once they're filled. So they are something that you kind of want to fill and serve, but certainly the cream can be made ahead, the puffs can be made ahead, and then, you know, just assemble them before you're going to serve them.
So for overnight, you could just keep them on a cooling rack, or if you put them in a cookie tin, should the lid be off?
No, you can, as long as they're cool, they cool down pretty quick. Because they're air inside, right? So they'll cool down pretty quick tonight. And then just once they're cool, you can either put foil over them right on the cookie rack or pop them in a tin.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Do I have to wait until the pastry is cool to fill and eat? Well, Allison, you can do whatever you like. They will crisp up as they cool.
It's on for 15 minutes.
Debs don't look pretty. Oh, yes. Well, and you know what? And if anybody wants to post their pictures of their puffs on Instagram, make sure you tag me. I'm at FoodWorksJen. So it's FoodWorksJen. And I would love to see your cream puffs. And we could have our own hashtag, Brescia Cook Along. That will be our hashtag. So I'll do some photos too, and everybody can see the puffs. And it would be very fun to see them. If you want to, you know, cut them when they're warm and dive in, absolutely. There are definitely no rules against that. Another. Oh, you posted them on the gram. Good, Emily. Posters on the gram. And I want to see your kids wait till tomorrow to eat them. Emily Richards, I don't know if anybody took her class in the fall, but Emily and I go way back to our Canadian living days, and we get to work together often. She's a fellow home economist, and yeah, so it's very fun that she joined us. And thank you, Jess. Thank you, Emily. So if you have any questions, Instagram is a good way to reach me. I have a Facebook page that's called Foodworks by Jennifer MacKenzie. My Instagram is at Foodworks, so FOODWORXJEN. So I don't know if anybody wants to type that into the chat so people can see. And yeah, so that would be great to see them. And so glad that you learned a thing or two. Somebody said they've always wanted to try them, so this is great. And somebody type it. Thank you. Yeah, Melissa got it there. Thank you, Deb. I'm glad we managed to salvage yours somehow. I don't know what happened, but thanks, Jordan. Thank you, Kathy and Susan. It's like romper room. That's how old I am, you can tell. And thanks to my dogs for being quiet. Thank you, Melissa. That's great. And Karen.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming and helping us tonight. I don't know if you can see, I have my whole tray here.
Beautiful.
Wow, yours looks lovely.
So
Awesome.
I kind of wish we weren't working remotely and I could bring these into Ursuline Hall and share them with everybody. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to eat them with my construction workers tomorrow, maybe in my house.
There you go. Although my husband says cautions against feeding your construction workers too well because then they take a lot longer to complete the job.
That's very true. Well, but you also have to keep them happy so they do a good job.
True. Yeah. Fine balance. Fine balance.
So thank you, Jennifer, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you all have a great dessert either tonight or like some of you are having them tomorrow.
I know, right now.
I hope that we can have another one of these in the future. We had one at homecoming last year, and this is our second online cooking event. So stay tuned for some more in the future, and maybe even if we can do a homecoming this year, maybe we will be doing like a hybrid version. Hopefully, maybe we can have some people on campus, and we can also have people join us remotely like we are tonight.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Allison.
I won't end this in case anyone else has any other questions for Jennifer, or you can send her a question on Instagram or on her Facebook page. But thanks everyone, and I hope that you have a wonderful dessert.